Let's start out with the questions for you. What have you learned new today? Everybody looks like they learned something and was nodding. Ooh, interesting. So what's new? Nothing, Ian.
No, my problem is my notes are over there.
I think we should have Ian's wife on the panel next year.
Ian's wife on the panel. Okay.
The user perspective.
Well, she gives me the user's perspective every day, and she's really glad I've got it down to 2 remotes in the lounge right now, even though she still uses the wrong one to try and control the television.
Only 2?
Yeah, only 2. I managed to get down to a television and an Apple TV.
Good.
A one for all that covers everything.
No, I still have to have 2 separate remotes. Apple are quite famous for not working with other
Yes,
people's
they don't work
devices.
with anything else.
That's because you tune your voice operating to only work on your voice.
I haven't even activated the Siri. And no Siri available. I haven't even told my wife about the Siri on that one. She's fed up enough with the...
We were just going through what someone's learned that was new. We've learned there's only 2 remote controls now at Ian's, so that's sort of a good start.
That's it, upstairs. And downstairs, I have every remote under the sun.
That's your office.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything?
I'm not going to admit to how much I know.
That's what I thought when you said it. I've learned so much. I was expecting more from everyone.
Well, I did learn something. I did learn something from Richard's presentation. It's about the timetable that we need to understand for when the decisions that can be made, who's going to make those decisions, and when we could have an answer to that view about whether it's 2034 or any other random 4-digit number for a year that we could possibly be doing this in. And it won't, remember, that will just be covering the digital terrestrial and satellite free services. It's a completely different decision making done by Sky and by Virgin. They're already on their own paths for that. I'm quite interested in the Sky path, which I'm sure won't be talked about today, but certainly we're watching it with interest. And I think that's it. It's the timetable. It is that this year submission of reports, next year possible green paper. The year after that, we have the renegotiation of the BBC Charter. We have the fact that it's renewal of satellites for Sky in 2030. And we have some numbers of 2034 batted around, which I've never found the source of, by the way. Because actually other people have used 2040. And these are all just numbers until we get something written down in a green paper.
Exactly. We've already got questions from the audience, so now it's time.
Hello, Alex Bogan from DTG. So yeah, just following up on your point there, Ian. The green paper that comes out next year, if the decision is, we're going to turn off DTT, whatever random 4-digit number that is going to be at, what would you say from all the kind of discussions today would be the kind of top 3 priorities for challenges that need to be solved for us to enable us to do that by whatever date it is? Do you have kind of an idea of that, like a priority list or something?
Are you asking it directly to me? Or
Well, the panel, I guess.
Categories.
Yeah.
Is there any one of those?
Well, there was something I was going to say earlier, which is what you were talking about when you said your mother-in-law using a tablet and things like that. But it's about the education that's needed for that and the willingness to also learn to use a new device. Some people just aren't interested in learning how to use a new system, a new device. They like the one they have, it works for them, and I think that's ultimately one of the issues. It's not that they can't and they can't learn, it's about the willingness and to have the patience to do so, which is something that my mother struggles with, just on the patient side.
I would be looking for a diverse market of products that would enable the transition, like we did the first time around. It was because we had, literally 10, 15 different set-top box manufacturers making adapters to convert existing devices to support digital. Here, I think the same sort of approach is necessary because regardless of what many people think, I'm not going to buy a brand new television just to be able to do this, and no one else is, because televisions are furniture. They're not devices that I pick and choose I'm going to use. I'm going to be keeping my television for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Still got that 3 or 4 years at least left on it. And even then when I buy a new one, I won't necessarily be buying one that is a Freely unit, because currently some of the major television manufacturers do not support Freely. But we need that diverse environment in a similar way as we had in the first transition. plumbed into interfaces into the technology rather than having to have a specific user interface. And that diversity gives us all the different things that people can then pick from in terms of the simplicity and capability that they may want from a service.
I mean, that usability is interesting, isn't it? I drive an electric car, and so there's kind of screens everywhere.
Do you want to come to the mic?
Oh.
Just to make it easy.
So yeah, usability. I drive an electric car, screens everywhere, and all the test reports and all the sort of the driver studies say that when people are driving, they want proper buttons for the key things.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you're moving around a bit, you don't have to try and navigate to the exact bit on the screen. But still, we get more and more screens, and still people buy them. So that even with individual people, there seems to be that kind of gap between what they actually wanted to use and what they like and are going to buy.
Well, they didn't necessarily know that the car didn't have buttons for doing certain things on the thing, and they need to use this big screen when they bought the car. They liked the look of the car. They didn't necessarily pick the user interface. And in fact, actually, in the car market today, there was a huge argument taking place because Apple is trying to take over the screens on cars. It's only managed to persuade one company to do that. Thankfully, not many of us have the problem with that car because it's an Aston Martin. But that is the battle that's happening. GM and Ford both have said they're not implementing Apple technologies for the UI. That's a problem for those people who want the choice to be able to do so. But it's also good from the fact that they're not going to be dependent upon one provider for the way it looks and the way it works. And therefore we may get a diversity of solutions which match our needs.
I think that's the thing. I think it's about what people weigh up in terms of what's important for them. As in the car example, as you said, it's probably more the look of the car rather than what the buttons look like on the screen. When it comes to your TV, I recently went through the painful process of picking a new TV, and it's impossible to find what the best one out there is. And sometimes you go with the best one in terms of the picture quality because that's what you might like, or the sound quality paired with picture. Then you find out it comes with a voice-only operated remote. And you don't think about it, you just assume, oh, my remote's going to have all the buttons I need, and then it doesn't. So,
My decision-making process and something like is shocking.
Yeah.
And you assume it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think there's a saying in the industry that I've heard, and that is that almost nobody buys a television because of the operating system.
Yeah.
They buy it because of what it looks like and how good it looks in their lounge. And that's the issue. Visual quality, to be honest, a lot of TVs have got very good visual quality. The ones that actually make a difference have got really great visual quality we don't buy because they're the ones that cost £1,200 or more. Yeah.
So the high definition that when you look at them in the shop, it's looking a little bit weird because you're too close.
But then they never look like that ever again. Yeah. Somehow, I don't know how that works.
Similar problems.
Yeah. But it is that thing that we will look at the motivations for why people buy televisions, and we need to look at the way real people work with these technologies, and we need to enable that through some method, and having a single UI based transition is not going to work for that. It has to be a diverse environment with lots of different solutions that fit each individual customer.
And I think you can argue that the software on television that is embedded in the television doesn't age very well. Right? Mm-hmm. The screen itself will last 8-10 years, but the software itself, after 3-4 years, most of your main apps are not supported anymore, or the interface becomes very laggy, right? So I would be careful with embedding more software into the TV.
Dirty secret is every television you buy today, even the ones that cost £1,200, they're incredibly cost engineered, and they're not got a single spare percentage of CPU to use for you. And actually that's why after 3 or 4 years, the apps tend to be very slow and sluggish.
I think that's why people are going for sticks as well, streaming sticks.
So I can keep
it's
the
a
screen.
cheaper way to upgrade.
Yeah. And do you know something? People keep saying it, set-top boxes will die. No. Not as long as we make televisions the way we make televisions today.
But streaming stick could be the solution. I remember we used to call them toasters, the on digital boxes that we were testing with all the various apps.
Is that because they were quite warm?
They were warm. You could probably make eggs with them, if not toast.
Yeah.
But maybe an option is people go out, get their own digital IP TV equivalent, or there's some multiple manufacturers selling, let's call it freely sticks for DVB-I. Didn't go down too well with Phil earlier. So let's say multiple manufacturers make freely sticks. Some of them may even take an Ethernet cable, and then that's the solution.
Yeah.
We could definitely do that by 2034 if we really have the bandwidth on the internet handy.
We had choice before, didn't we, on DTT when we were transitioning. So we had loads of different types of set-top boxes. I know we didn't have them here, but they had conditional access cards in the Nordics and the rest of Europe. They could go into TVs, directly into TVs. So we did have choice then, and I think there's a lot to be learned from the earlier analog to digital switch in terms of how it was done. But I think my key takeaway today is that I think we have to realise that broadcast, like Ian's been saying, has never been that good. It's never worked for me in multiple homes and multiple different areas in and around London. So, you know, there's a lot of people with those sorts of experiences, right? It's not perfect. And I think IP is far better, even now, than any broadcast I've ever had.
I think that's a really good point. I think we need to be careful. I think we need to be really careful about setting the standards for IPTV on something that wasn't that good anyway. You know, some bits, back to the latency, you know, maybe more, maybe less, perhaps that doesn't matter. But we need to really think again about what actually matters to the consumer before we start setting the standards to it. Question?
A totally different subject. I run a small internet service provider, and of course we're always worried about how much traffic we're going to see on our networks over the years. And we've seen increase in traffic, largely in accordance with some of the graphs we've seen on the screen today. At the beginning of the day, I was really quite worried that suddenly there'll be a big step as everyone switches to IP television. It looks like that isn't going to be the case. It's going to be gentle. But there's one thing that does worry me. A lot of the houses I go to, I find that the TV is on, well, not 24 hours a day, but 18 probably, on DTT. So what's going to happen to those sort of people when they go to IP? There's going to be a continuous drain from all these users. And that worries me a little bit.
Well,
any comments?
A lot more volume through the network,
Yeah.
not necessarily,
But-
a lot more volume, yeah.
as of today, you'll find that they have to do special actions to that TV to make sure it doesn't run for longer than 4 hours, because that's power regulations that force it to be maximum 4 hours to be on without some interaction. So there's a 4 hour limit you've already got for that. But if a customer wants to have it on all the time, yeah, they're going to have it on all the time. There are mitigations like stopping streaming without some sort of level of interaction that can happen on some sticks as well. I've seen that in operation. Again, that helps a lot in terms of stopping the stream working and thus using bandwidth. But realistically, it comes down to the fact is we're providing them with a service and they're going to use it. And the question is, we can't stop them using it, and nor should we. We've got to figure out how a business can work with that. And therefore, you should use that in the calculations for your traffic levels and trying to be very, very big best friends with every single public CDN provider. And even those people like involved in BT who are going to put other types of devices inside your network to mitigate the transfer into your network.
Yeah, that brings me to another point. These big sporting events that everyone says has a huge impact on the network, you hardly notice it. It doesn't happen. The thing that hits our network is when a new game is announced and everyone downloads 300 gigabytes of it overnight, and that's a big problem sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you can talk to that, really. There you go.
I think we see that the same thing. Is we see super peaks from football events, but at the moment they collide with a game download happening the same day. That's where we hit the really huge peaks that we have to currently scale our network for. That's why we're looking to deduplicate as much traffic as we can, be it the game download, be it the over-the-top stream. with the technology that we're working on. I mentioned Maud earlier, we're working on our production code with Broadpeak at the moment. We hope to have that out, kind of working in the field very, very soon. But not everyone's network is fully multicast capable, and that's something you will need to decide whether you build out that capability or whether you choose to go another way.
And to add on to that, you talked about the transition's not going to be a cliff, because guess what? It already started, and it started in 2008. So we're just a long way through that path already of the fact that we've had IP streaming for a long time. And I can't remember who mentioned the data, and I think I've got a source for it, that right now, I think you mentioned the data, 50% of content of viewing minutes is coming from IP-based on-demand platforms.
So I shouldn't worry.
You should worry, because you've got to cope with 100%. Yeah, double it easily. And the challenge for the live one, and the reason why we talk about live as being the big peak, is it's trying to get one set of assets out to every single consumer simultaneously, not a wide variety of different assets that can be pre-cached.
Yeah.
And maybe just on the scale, right, because I think this is an interesting one. We talked about it over lunch. I think, Andy, your number was 375 terabits, right? BT's network is about 35 terabits, roughly speaking, today.
I'm
30%.
not sure I can comment on that.
Broadly speaking, I think we're looking at about 100 terabits across the UK today. So we probably need to triple, nearly quadruple the capacity of the network, right, to give you an idea. If we were to move everything across, it's probably triple to quadruple the capacity, broadly
I
speaking.
think it depends where you look in the network, because there is the core and then there's pinch points around the edge, right? There is asymmetry throughout the networks. I'm sure some places will cover it fine and other places won't. And that's why we're looking at these technologies.
I think some of the growth, for our estimates, we think it's a factor of 10, given maximum traffic we ship in between 20 to 30 terabits per second. Our estimates are not very different from Andy's about where we need to be. So we see an order of magnitude growth needed in order to move from DTT. But we see that's a steady growth, the same that we've been, events have always, if you'd asked us a few years ago, we would ship nowhere near 20 to 30 terabits. So events, the resolution of the content, the scale, that's what's driven us. So I think for all of us, there's a steady growth needed, but then none of us want a sharp transition.
Does it make your life easier, Phil, to not have to support the DTT or DSAT or DCAP or do anything else?
My personal life? It certainly
the
gives me less work to do if we don't have to worry about pitch quality or IP. They are different parts of the organisation that operate in those areas, apart from, they come together into my team, because we do lots of pitch quality work across the platforms. And some they've already come together, and most devices out there are hybrid anyway, so we're having to support those and make the best of those. I think that the biggest benefit to the BBC ultimately is one of money. We're paying for multiple distribution platforms, whether that's DTT or satellite. They all come with a cost. They all come with an environmental cost. I think that's where the biggest savings come back to the BBC. The amount of change that takes place in DTT and DSAT now is deliberately quite minimal. Back to my earlier comment, we try to attract people towards IP. That's where our innovation is. That's why BBC UHD content is hardly only on iPlayer. The fact there's no spectrum available for it is just a minor matter. I think we know how to operate DTT and satellite quite reliably. It's not a big drain. And going back to Alex's question, I think most of the technology problems, there are solutions out there. What we're waiting for is a set of agreements, regulation from the government. How do they frame it? So actually what's a load of sticky commercial and business issues can be negotiated into a form that all parties are happy with. Then I think that opens up the path for the IP transition more than technology. So I think we're always in danger of having debates about technology when the real issues we're facing at the moment are not about technology. Okay, there's money, BT, whatever's needs to spend. That's a very important part of this. And there's also the future of public service broadcasting in the UK in particular. I'm sure we're all waiting to see where the government takes us.
Or to put it a little bit more directly, there's a huge sustainability improvement from not operating multiple platforms, and there is a cost improvement, which at the simplest level is 3% of the license fee of the United Kingdom can be saved by not operating broadcast.
On the sustainability point, we've been clear. Our latest work is that the biggest sustainability gains comes from only running one system.
Which is a multi-purpose system, which is used for many things.
Now it's your time to go.
Yeah.
We've got a question, so I'm going to stop them from speaking, otherwise we don't get the questions in.
Going back to the kind of super peaks and games downloads, I think I've seen a BT policy paper before, BT advocating the policy intervention to say Activision can't release this patch on the same day as World Cup game, for instance. So do you think there is a role for that? And I think also some debate around what is the role of net neutrality going forwards, or should we be giving old people who can't use the internet maybe routers that just deliver IPTV? So I don't know if anyone has any sort of thoughts on that quite broad topic area.
Where we are today, absolutely that's the case. That would be our position. We would love for game downloads not to happen at the same time as a football match. Once technologies, again, keep saying it more, is in the field and proven, that cost benefit to that may actually become negligible. If I don't have that deduplication, I can guarantee that service through, then game downloads can do what they do. That question is going to be different for everyone standing here, I think.
Maybe the other side of that is we're also working on trying to bring games download into on-net CDNs and even multicast distribution, right? We could subscribe to the old, way of, doing looping the file on itself on the carousel, and then you start downloading the game halfway through, but at very high bitrate, and then you get to the end and then back at the beginning. So you end up basically leveraging multicast to do your game download. That's something that is technically possible. It's not deployed yet. It's mostly POCs, but we could even leverage multicast for that.
Seems there's a slight dichotomy in terms of knowing, fibre operators that are desperate to fill capacity in their pipes, and we have the solution. Maybe they should take it up.
You can have to say it again.
Okay, I'll do that. Fibre operators have been complaining about people not using their networks enough. They have all this capacity that's unused, and at the same time, we're also complaining that we might have too much in the future. Do you think that's actually an issue at all?
I think I've heard fibre providers, i.e. ISPs, say both, depending who they're speaking to, and I'm saying that probably a little bit more safely as an independent, some of the other people on the panel. At the end of the day, you've built a product that provides broadband internet access to consumers, and you're selling it using a speed metric as a way of differentiation. That could be the issue. Because I'm not. I've had actually in one of these presentations before. I've had someone talk about bad customers who don't want to use too much. But if you sold me a 1 gigabit service and I use 1 gigabit per second, how can I be a bad customer? I think there's a challenge around how we're selling speed because it's not useful. And certainly I know that some ISPs today are having problems persuading customers to take faster speeds because actually they don't need them. And I'll be true to that. I've got 1 gig. I'm a bit special. I move uncompressed video. I use terabytes per month. I'm a weird person. I can use 1 gig, but I must admit the average consumer, the challenge to that is they really maybe need to look at a lower bit rate service if they're looking at speed. But consistency or some other factor, that's something which needs to be addressed for why we buy broadband.
Because it's network quality, right? That's what matters, and it's that stability in the network. It's not how fast your internet is going. It's being able to actually have a stable and usable experience in a sense that is worthy of what it's trying to provide.
And especially at the busy hour, right? When everybody wants to use it, that's when
I gave that example about having a 1 gig cable connection that was as good as not having a connection for the TV that I had.
Yeah.
But I think you should try and sort of help some of the product people on ISPs who need to figure out a better way of selling broadband than speed.
They didn't learn the FTTC lesson, clearly.
To be honest, I think they've been pushed into a hole of their own making, that they moved away from usage-based billing, and that's created this situation today where it will be very hard to reintroduce a usage-based billing model.
No one wants that.
And nobody wants that. However, that's what we have for electricity, because originally electricity was sold on how many amps you could have.
Well, I mean,
It wasn't sold on a consistent service, and now we have enough amps.
But that's not how TV
No.
is sold. Like, when you plug in your aerial, you don't get told off for watching too much TV.
Yeah, no, but that's true actually. I shouldn't be told off for using too much TV. Going back to the discussion point of about the television being on 24 hours a day, so be it. It's going to be there.
Yeah. I think some of the 5G operators going back to charging for, not kind of like unlimited data, but actually charging for usage.
But that is interesting. I don't know how they're going to quite do it, because it's a challenging thing to take something away that people don't have to.
They do it with tiers, right? If you're limited up to a certain amount of gigs, and then after that they throttle you at a lower speed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fuzzy
Sneaky.
phase.
Yeah.
But we're always almost discussing DTTs are very big signals carrying the internet. Television is. We do very good HD at 6.5 megabits per second. We do UHD at the moment at 18 megabits per second. New codecs have become usable. That comes down to 10 megabits per second. Moore's law takes the internet. Moore's law takes the internet to a very different place in terms of the amount of capacity that traditional TV is going to take. I think we need to think about that as more. Our CDN servers now can easily ship to just under 200 gigabits per second. The question is, where's the demand for that much? The network is. Moore's law is going to take the internet into a place where I think, for most uses, traditional television is actually quite a small part of how the capacity is going to be used. Video is, video compression techniques, it is not a big signal carry anymore.
But isn't it the totality of what we're using? So the devices, the gaming, my son's not even using 2 devices, he's on 3. So he's on his mobile, laptop and the TV.
Yeah, as I said, I'm a bit special. I have a gig. I don't even touch the sides at times, most of the time.
Yeah.
It's only those 2 or 3 days a month or every couple of months when I have to move something quickly that's big, real big, of the terabyte size. But other than that, I'm barely touching the sides, and I don't know why I would have more than 150.
50 is more than enough.
That's probably what you're getting on Wi-Fi anyway, right?
Oh no, I have special Wi-Fi, don't worry. I'll make sure it all works.
How we get to the overall scale, resilience and reliability that we need, I think, is the technical challenge.
Yeah. And those new applications we haven't yet identified, which are not video.
Yeah. But they're probably all one-to-one. So, if 90% plus of the traffic is one-to-one, apart from these pesky live events, then it's just a capacity challenge. 2034 doesn't seem so bullish after today, I have to say, actually.
I was going to make a comment regarding the games downloads. So, as good as it sounds to tell other people when to push their downloads to devices, we can't really control that. And we were talking about moving to the playing ground, which is the internet, right? So on the internet, you don't really get to control when traffic gets sent your way or how much of it there is. You just have to provision capacity and make sure that it reaches the end user, right? And so this is one of the things that we got to account for, which is we have less control over the ingress that we see. We just got to make sure that we're ready for the tsunami.
That's right.
I can test my Freeview signal on a meter, and I can optimise my aerial. I can test my FreeSat and optimise my signal. I can measure the speed on my broadband connection, but how do I evaluate the CDN as a customer?
Wow. I don't think you do, by the sound of it.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
You shouldn't have to. The same reason you don't evaluate whether the local 11 kilovolt down conversion transformer works or not. It just works.
My hairstyle.
Yeah. Essentially, consumers shouldn't even know about the CDN. They shouldn't even think about it. It should just work.
But when it doesn't.
When it doesn't, then their internet's broken.
I think
Not necessarily.
when it breaks as a concept, everyone will blame the content provider. You know, we get complaints, whether it's the DTT. It's a very simple contractual situation for us to understand where it breaks in the chain. I think the challenge with IP is how ultimately do we identify at scale why someone's TV isn't working. And you know, the relationships in an IP delivery chain are very different. You know, we contract up to effective CDN boundary. After that, there's all sorts of parts of the chain that we don't control. I think the challenge for industry in the space is how do we help the viewer in those circumstances, and there are various thoughts being given to things you may build into your streaming apps, but other ways that we can help identify who the viewer needs to speak to in order to restore the level of service they expect.
Yeah. So it's all OpenReach's fault.
Of course. And
yes, they're not here, so yes.
I think you also end up in a place where you make you also end up in a place where you make approximations, right? There's one case that comes to mind is DAZN, but they launched in Italy, so they moved the football that used to be on broadcast onto IP, and they run into a ton of issues, typically linked to connectivity between the CDNs and the telco networks, not enough bandwidth between CDN and telco networks. And this turned into quite an ugly fight between the telcos, between DAZN, between the Italian regulator, AGCOM, to the point where they pushed a law that was, probably too broad, but it was kind of interesting. They basically mandated that as a customer, if you could demonstrate that you didn't have access to the DAZN stream in less than 10 or 15 seconds after clicking, then it would be an issue with DAZN and they should be refunding you. Now, this is a very broad rule, right? Anything could be wrong. It could be a Wi-Fi, it could be a broadband being down, it could be anything along the chain. So testing the CDN is a tricky element, and yes, sometimes you can have connectivity issues back to the CDN, but typically you will see other problems before that.
I see the CDN as analogous to the broadcast transmission CTT. So you wouldn't be monitoring that device. That would be the responsibility of the service providers to make sure that you're using that device. And I believe most service providers here will have dual vendor strategies, and they will mutually switch over to other CDNs as soon as they see problems.
And by the way, there are tools available for you to check, because some of these providers like CloudFront and Netflix themselves provide their own apps which provide different results than you would say for other speed testing apps, because of where they're doing the tests, the speed test too.
So I can speak.
So what Design ended up doing was launching channels on linear, because Italy's internet wasn't ready.
So I can speak to what Sky is doing, which is namely you're not going to test a single CDN. There's a lot of CDNs that we use to circle through in case there's a failure somewhere, and obviously that gets caught up by the telemetry bits that we have. We run a CDN selection engine that is being supported by analytics data that we get from the client side. So you can't really just test one CDN, where there's a cascade of CDNs that we circle through to make sure that you do get a service. So if something fails, we'll power through a bunch of CDNs and make sure that you do get the content ultimately.
There's only one I'm connected to that I'm worried about.
But you're not. Your problem. You do not know which CDN you're connected to. Our applications, so Sky, we choose switch from a moment segment boundary if there are problems between CDNs. We have most major broadcasters run a multi-CDN strategy.
There isn't the equivalent of repointing your antenna to a different transmitter. Because that's all you could do, by the way, if you lost your transmitter.
You're very experienced.
No. I'm just equidistant from 3 separate transmitters, which caused my problems.
Any other questions? There must be more. Go on.
So at Liberty Global, we've been looking at the piracy issue for quite some time. It's a substantial problem, and it's really interesting hearing the take from the panel today. You seem to keep going back to the UI being a driving impact as to why people move towards IP solutions, that the user interfaces maybe too clumsy, and this is pushing people towards an IP or a pirate IP product. The reality is, 99% of the time, and probably 99.9% of the time, it's price.
Yes.
It's purely price. We can argue about how good the services are. The reality with IP pirate streams are they're not very good. So quality-wise, yes, you get loads of channels, they look great, a lot of them in HD and 4K, the user interface is garbage. It's not great. There's no DVR functionality. It's a bit of a hot mess, to be honest. But it gives you the content that you need. So on that basis, what's the panel's view about how you combat this move towards piracy? Because at the moment it is a tidal wave. Like the recent Ofcom figures state that 38% of TV streaming traffic in the UK is pirate traffic. But that's only the people that admit to it. We all know at least more than 38% of the people that we know.
It's over 50%.
Well, easily. It's probably way beyond 60 at this stage. Now, a separate point, and this goes back to the morning session, we talked a lot about this digital inclusion, this move towards IP and this move away from broadcast. DVB-C is seen end of its life, DVB-S is almost gone, DVB-T is going to disappear pretty quickly as well. But today there's still 5% of the UK has no home fixed internet connectivity. So we're moving towards a world where your fixed phone line, your mobile phone services are IP based, your TV service is IP based, your entire digital world is now IP based. But we've now got a genuine situation where you're going to have proper digital exclusion for the lower end of society that can't afford an internet connection, or the opposite end of society that don't know what internet is.
Here's an interesting thing. I had some of this in the presentation slides I got. That issue of digital exclusion, that 5%, by the end of January 2027, if you want a phone, it's internet delivered. Yeah, that's it. If you want a phone service. So everyone who has a phone line, which is a much more important system for many things, will everyone have one by that point? Who needs one?
That is unfortunately possibly a problem.
That's possibly a problem. Because, there was the USO for phone lines, Universal Service Obligation. So if you wanted it was one of the few things you actually had as a right. If you wanted a phone, you could ask for someone and someone had to give you one. So that was, it's quite unusual. You don't have the same thing for clean air or clean water, so, but that's saying that all the phones are being moved to IP. Effectively, that gives you the right to order the USO for broadband, which is 10 megabits per second, which is useless for anything other than just making a phone call.
I would disagree.
Because you may disagree, but you will be wrong.
At the end of the day, what you need for a video stream at SD quality is what exactly?
A lot more than 3, which is what you will
No,
get.
it's sub 2 meg.
Yeah.
Sub 2 meg.
But that's you will be lucky to get 3 meg on a USO line at busy hour, which is that's the point when everyone assesses the quality of their broadband.
But that's going into the capacity issue at the back end, not the local loop.
Yeah, it's still the point though.
And that's what we talked about we have to get ready for, is the fact there should not be a slowdown of the ability to feed every local loop with what's required to deliver video or voice. And certainly with voices, it's January 2027. We'll know by then how good that has been. Because they're serious about the turn off, it goes off.
They are, but the reality is quite different. And there is a small percentage of homes that are not cost effective, that Openreach will throw their arms up in the air about and say, we cannot convert these, so we're just going to have to cut you off. And you do have an alternative, which is Starlink, Project Kuiper, all these satellite services. That's their get out of jail free. But they're not cost effective, they're not affordable. So you'd still end up with a situation where there will be certain homes that can't get it physically, and then other homes that can't get it from a cost perspective. So you still have this digital exclusion piece that will exist, and it'll be more dramatic, because at the moment, people have access to internet services on their phone at all ends of society, and you've got access to digital terrestrial TV. I use the old example of student accommodation, couldn't afford to pay a TV licence, couldn't afford to pay any subscription services, but you had your old rabbit ears and you could watch terrestrial TV for free.
No, illegal.
Well, yes, it was illegal, but it's reality.
No, the reality is they get lots of lovely red letters for months throughout each year they're living in student accommodation.
And you get ignored.
They get ignored until they start doorstepping.
But that's a very sort of unique example, but then you stretch that across the lower end of the financial spectrum in the UK, and there are people that can't afford connectivity and now have lost any access to broadcast TV. So there is that digital exclusion piece.
Sorry, £160 you have to pay for a TV licence. It's not a free service.
But also look at the figures that I think Ian you gave about the low cost social tariff. Yeah, only 1.2% using social tariff. To your point, because the social tariff gives you a low quality broadband that they don't want. They want proper broadband. So they are prepared to pay for proper broadband and not to take the social tariff, even though they probably know it's available to. It's not what they want. It's that important that they will pay.
Yeah.
Can I just say, sorry, can I dive in for a moment? I just wanted to add something on the social tariffs. Hello, so everyone here? Right. I just wanted to add something on the social tariff side. I live in a completely normal part of the country. It's not especially rich, it's not especially poor. We launched a social tariff. Instead of £25, we would charge £5 for broadband internet. For the same speed delivered, was 50, now 100. And I have precisely no customers at 130 who've asked for it.
Mm-hmm. That's the issue that was shown on the slide I showed, is that they're available, people are not buying them, and it isn't because they're lower grade. They're just cheaper in many respects from the lowest deal that's possible from those particular ISPs. They're very performant, they're more than the 30 megabits per second line speed that we're talking about. They're perfectly capable for delivering everything. In fact, 10 years ago, that's exactly the broadband I had. You know, and I was doing Netflix on 4 streams. They're perfectly capable, but people aren't getting them for some reason. And it's a bit like voting in the SCTE elections. We don't understand why people are failing to do that and failing to get the social tariffs. And it can be a social stigma issue, but that should be looked at. Because ultimately that is the way to solve the cost issue of moving to pure IP delivery.
And if you want to know where to move, it's West Berkshire community broadband.
Yeah.
So the other point there about the piracy issue, that open question to the forum, how do you tackle that?
So I think part of it, and it's obviously not the whole story, is it comes back down to rights and regulations. So I don't know if there's any football fans in the room. We have a law in the UK, a regulation that says you cannot broadcast a football match on Saturday at 3 p.m. That is a fact. That the history is a manager of Burnley in the 70s felt that by broadcasting football on TV, there were only a few channels at the time, you would cannibalise the football pyramid and people wouldn't go and see smaller clubs, right? I don't think that's true. They don't have a blackout rule, that's what it's called, in Germany, for example. So as a result, what's happened in the top couple of leagues over the past few seasons is more and more matches are moved away from 3 p.m. Saturday, Thursday night, Saturday morning, Saturday evening, Sunday and so forth. And I've got too many kids and it's just complexified my life. My friends are not available, my kids are making me miss matches and so on and so forth. This is a weird sort of digital exclusion we've created here. Right? It's not actually possible for the people who live in the UK or Ireland to watch football matches from the English Premier League most of the time, or much of the time. However, if you live out on Fire Stick. Well, exactly. So solution 1, you pirate, so you don't pay, or you pay some cost. Solution 2, move to another country. So if you're in Canada, you actually get a better experience. You can subscribe and get all of those matches. And God forbid somebody would have a VPN turn up in Canada at 3 p.m. on Saturday, right? So it's created a grey market, right? But we have the technology with digital to broadcast every match, right? I feel a big part of the piracy equation, and we saw the same with music, is that people can't get access at all. At all. But yes, there are obviously other issues as well.
There is also the cost issue. And let's be honest here, what the cost issue is. It's called spending 60 to 70% of your revenue on a bunch of people in shorts on a pitch.
And to add to that, I don't think it's all about the UI. It's all about, in my book at least, about being able to see all the content in one place. It's not fragmented across several platforms. You get one password, you pay one account, you see everything, right? And you're willing to put up with how crappy the UI is or some latency because you know that you're getting a dodgy service, but you're getting everything that you want to see, and you're fine with seeing SD. And how are we fighting that? So just as an anecdote, we have a phenomenon which is people are aware of, what's called CDN leeching, where the pirates go from their UI and grab segments from the CDN, which is our content, and we're also ending up paying the bill at the end of the month. So that's bad because one, we're losing customers that aren't paying to see the content, and two, we're also paying for the pirates to consume off of the CDNs that we're paying. And how are we fighting that? We're doing URL tokenization, which is checked at the CDN edge, and we're also implementing a common access token.
Yeah, sorry, can I just chip in there as well? So Cartesian did quite a lot of work in this content security area, and we did some work on a Fire Stick. And what surprised me, supporting a team that was in League One, now in the Championship, I could watch those games at 3 o'clock on a Saturday using the Fire Stick, but they're not broadcast anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a weird phenomenon, and they would also put on audio from the local radio channel. So if it's Portsmouth, as it was, you get Radio Solent commentary. And that's when the latency becomes a bit of an issue, because obviously there's a difference between the radio and what you're seeing on the screen. So that's a surprise. Where does that come from? So we looked at it, but I mean, nobody was paying us.
That's technology innovation from a pirate that isn't coming from an operator.
We need to employ that person.
However, like I said, the reason they can do that is because they don't have to comply with content owners' requirements, like not broadcasting at 3 o'clock on a Saturday.
Yeah, but why can I listen to? I can stream Radio Norfolk. Yes, you can actually do that if you're a I'm legally allowed to stream Radio Norfolk and hear the audio, but I can't watch it. I mean, if you watch, like, there's a TV show on BBC, Final Score, you watch 4 or 5 ex-football players watching the football, telling you about the goals. It's just insane. It's like Gogglebox of football. We have to turn this upside down, and I think the problem comes with these massive billion-dollar rights deals. One way, I think, for the smaller clubs, and women's football is like kind of leading the charge here, is you actually have direct-to-consumer relationship with your club. That's one way. Don't worry, Juliana, there's still a way for Sky to profit here. So Sky can still buy the rights for the big clubs, but please get the regulations changed so that we can watch every match and put them back at 3.
And regulations are going to be needed because, warning, in the US today, you can't watch the NFL on one service. You need at least 6 separate services, of which the main one costs, I think it's $600. Straight up cost.
Okay, I take the lesson. I'll see what I can do for football at 3 p.m.
Yeah, I think there is this thing that these are non-technical issues. These are the business issues which they make for themselves, which drive piracy. And there's only so much us technologists can do about stamping down on privacy. I think regulators got other challenges to do that. The legal side have got challenges around that. And it's not just one of those things have to be done. All of them have to be done.
So maybe just to finish on the piracy element, I think we've seen piracy evolving with streaming, right? In the sense that it was pretty tight with traditional broadcast. We had, technology that would be good enough when it comes to securing the content. With streaming, we basically rely on DRM that's been completely broken, many times, and it's not enough. So what we started to see, back to Ilina's point, is we need to implement more security in the delivery layer, right? Come up with new ways to basically know if we can trust a request for a chunk of video. Is this browser really the same browser that made your initial request and got authentified right at the beginning of the session, maintaining, for example, browser identity through the session? become something new and something that we probably will have to implement going forward. Otherwise, we have no idea. We can share tokens, we can share URLs. There are ways to mitigate that, but there are limits as well. So I think we're entering a new phase of security now where we really have to bake more security inside the delivery layer.
I think we're becoming more capable at tracking individual IP as well and actual users. I think the technology is almost there, but I think piracy is going to get much worse. I mean, if you don't think it's bad enough at the moment, there's too many streaming services, they're too expensive, and they're driving people back to piracy. And again, it goes back to content discovery, the ability to find series, or when a series switches from Netflix to Sky or vice versa. I mean, that's like a nightmare. It's with series, you're going to have to subscribe to something else. So the way these are organised is completely wrong, to be honest. I don't think it's going to work into the future. There's too many of these services and they're not all going to be successful.
By fragmenting the offering, you diminish the usability and you drive people back towards piracy.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's driven me, I mean, I don't pirate, but that's driven me away from TV. I don't watch any TV. I haven't watched any TV for 2 years. It's just, it's a waste of time. I don't have time to sit there looking for things that I don't want to watch, which is how I end up spending half an hour, and then I'm like, I'm not going to waste any more time on this. And I just find TV to be a complete waste of time because of
Unusual choice.
It's all down to discovery.
Unusual choice of conference, man.
I don't watch DVDs either. I just don't watch TV anymore. I'm on YouTube most of the time.
We did touch on it. By the way, YouTube's TV. It's all TV. If it's video at a distance, it's TV. It's as simple as that. We're just having different forms of business model and types of distribution is really what we're talking about.
But even gaming is turning to freemium as well. So if you look in Asia, that's becoming a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's one way to combat piracy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about pay-per-view, like micropayments for each of the events that you want to watch?
Honestly, I can't be bothered to look for services and connect to different services, and that's what drives me crazy. I'm a big sports fan, and I love my sports, but I have to rely on Match of the Day, which is what I was doing 20 years ago. I used to have a Sky Sports subscription, but because of family, kids, work and stuff, I don't have time to watch the games anymore, so it's not worth me subscribing. I mean, I have a Sky Glass, but my family uses it, I don't. That's the reality.
I think what you just said it would work if you had a universal place to find everything that was on, so you could easily choose what you wanted to take.
Entertainment OS on Sky Glass.
None of those services want to work together. They don't want to share their metadata. They don't want all the crucial elements you need to put something like that together has been tried before. And it's failed.
Exactly, that's the main thing. I mean, in our most recent consumer survey in the UK alone, 65% of people said that they would like a centralised point to find all their TV shows, movies and sports in one place. Yeah. It's a big problem.
I mean, even with integrated apps, they're still not getting all the metadata that they need. So we're nowhere near.
It's changing.
It's the old a la carte problem on subscription, cable TV and satellite. For years and years, consumers wanted a la carte. I want that channel, but I don't want that channel. Mm-hmm. And we're now in a world where we've got a la carte content. But it's too expensive. So
it's really not a la carte though, that's the thing. I think this is it. We've got an explosion in different services and we have a scaling issue of current user interfaces and current business models for how you give people access to the content that they wish to watch. And that is many leveled issues, including the user interface design and how you do content discovery, because it is the issue today. It's well known in the industry. 30 minutes to 2 hours it takes to find something to watch today, despite the fact that Netflix have put 3 items on the top of their front screen. Because guess what? It's not the content you want to watch.
AI is here to help us, right? So it's probably also going to...
I think there's a lot more technical innovation needed in content discovery right now to make it usable for everybody, and it isn't that usable.
You need to change the AI first.
It's basically all Disney's fault.
No, because they would restrict your access to the content, just re-release it every 6 years.
That's true, yes.
On a different media.
The vault, right?
Yeah.
I would say Disney are buying up companies and consolidating everything like that. So they're working on it.
So who's going to take the problem home and fix it by 2034?
I don't know, I'm busy solving football KPI.
I think the point I made is it's not special to IP. It's already here. We already have a content discoverability issue. It doesn't matter whether it's broadcast or IP based.
I think that
But that does-
that's fixing the rights issues for 2034. That's a different challenge.
Yeah.
Sorry, and that is important though, because if we have that issue, we already know it, and you're saying it is one of the principal barrier to the successful introduction of IPTV, then yeah, we need to do something about it.
I wouldn't call it a barrier. As I said, it's already here. It's already a barrier for everyday usage today on the platforms we have today.
Barrier for me, can
Yeah.
find anything.
Yeah, you can't find anything. That's it.
A simpler platform could be an easy to use platform.
I'm going to look at the Sky Glass.
I once commented that Apple were doing that. They were trying to reduce the amount of content they had, but guess what? Business came into play. They put their prices up. They just charge more. They had a chance to be a low-cost service that has key content, but now they're following the path everyone else has followed of trying to aggregate content under their banner. And
Going towards one, I think you will see thought given to simpler ways of engaging the audience to help with inclusion as we try to expand IPTV, as we need to deliver services to a wider range of people. I think thought will be given, at least in broadcast, as to how we design those UIs where we have influence to help with that problem.
yeah, it happened before. The UIs did improve once. You saw some of them earlier in my presentation. The 2000s was a massive set of innovations in UIs. Just it didn't continue with that. Because prior to 2000, I've got some images of user interfaces on television before that. It's knitting needles in the eyes jobs, basically.
I know you don't like them, but Apple are quite good at UIs.
No, I've got an Apple TV. That's the other device you saw in my image.
He has only 2 remote control. He mentioned that. One is the Apple, one is the TV.
But I must admit, I do have every device and I try all of them. They've all got challenges. They've all got positives.
Any more questions?
When's coffee?
One question there.
Got one just at the back.
Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Question around sustainability. If we're looking at consensus 3 to 4x current traffic when DTT switchover happens and everything moves to IP, that suggests also an enormous increase in power consumption to sustain those networks that we're scaling up and up and up. Ignoring for a minute technology like multicast API that can assist with that. How does the industry address that, given our increasing need to provide sustainable services and reducing power consumption?
Well, no, I could speak to it because I looked at it during an IBC accelerator. Energy consumption in data networks has got nothing to do with data rates as such. It's about capacity. And the capacity is going up regardless whether we move to TV onto it or not. And actually the main driver for the capacity then is not about the single event so much as all the content we got. We've got to recognise that we are going to be watching content on demand a lot in the future, and that capacity will be put in place for that. Our job is to try and make that as sustainable as possible by reducing energy consumption, but that's not really the data rates per se.
Yeah, so I mean, perhaps it's a bit simplistic, my thought process, but more traffic, more boxes, more power.
It's the capacity question, and in recent modelling that we did as part of one of the accelerators, given the network is a constant in some respects, the CDN deployment can be positively impacted by using things like multicast API. We can reduce the CDN capacity required for that, but that's only affecting the CDN capacity. And you have to understand that 90% of the energy consumption is the TVs and set-top boxes themselves. And that can't be altered whether you're on broadcast or IP, it's the same. And those figures actually also correlate with, I think, the BBC paper produced.
So we've been modelling the IP transition for a number of years and developing our models, originally in conjunction with the University of Bristol, and we've done work ourselves. The latest report we published just before IBC, we don't see partly for the reason that Ian expressed around actually most of the consumption is with the devices in the home, just out of necessity. About 6 or 7% is used in the network. In terms of broadcast versus IP, you don't see any big factors. Obviously, what hours per viewing hour goes up as less people watch DTT. We don't see it as a big issue in this space. We started off with almost the comment that you made around being very concerned about the IP transition, and our modelling work has shown that not to be an issue. Now clearly there are issues around the total energy, and that's all related to the number of services and multiplexers that we run, but the actual technologies themselves do not seem to have any fundamental differences in terms of sustainability from an energy viewpoint.
And you can all do your...
Because if you go on the BBC R&D website, you'll find there's a white paper, what we set out some of the most recent modelling. There's more work to come in that space, but so far we haven't found there to be a distinguishing factor between the two approaches.
You can actually do your bit. You can actually reduce energy consumption of the majority of the energy being used in television today by closing your curtains or turning your lights off when watching television. You can save 30 to 50% of the total energy by just doing that one thing.
Depending on the screen technology.
Here's dependent upon whether it's got a light-enabled screen, but most of them have got sensors now in the screen that increase the brightness of the screen in light rooms. And that's where you can save the energy. I say it many times as part of some of the projects I've done. I can make a single television go from 70 watts of power consumption to 250, just depending whether I've got the curtains open.
I think also we recognise the EU regulation and the developments by the industry. My 55-inch OLED takes substantially less power than a 32-inch LCD TV from a few years ago. So I think the industry here, partly through regulation, partly through their own innovation, did a massive improvement in home.
But the OLED TVs, by the way, are those £1,200 ones I've talked about that you don't buy. I want to say you, I mean the public, you. We buy the £300 really energy and efficient ones and spend all that money on the electricity bill instead.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have to say, probably to your question, just not getting any worse is probably not good enough.
There are technology improvements in both DTT and IP where things will improve. We haven't published that work yet, but both have capability to improve.
Mm-hmm. Also, do that mathematics on the television side. You'd be surprised if you can measure the power of your TV yourself to work out how long it is before you get payback on spending £350 on a television or £1,200 on a television. It's a very short time.
Depends how much you watch.
It also depends how much you pay for your electricity. And that's a lot of money now.
Don't switch on. Any more?
How long does the OLED last for?
I've got one which is 7 years old and it has absolutely zero problems. These are not plasmas.
Yeah, plasma will last for 17 years.
Years. It will degrade, but by that point my wife will want a different piece of furniture in the lounge.
8 years is a useful picture online, so...
There was a lot of stories about OLEDs being problematic, and there were some problems early on, but they've solved many of those issues very, very quickly because, frankly, their business is selling televisions, so they want to make sure people buy them.
Yes, so stop working before the TV comes.
The reason I have an Apple TV is because Apple TV Plus doesn't work on my OLED television. Aprot has started. Also, Disney Plus doesn't now either.
Yeah, Paramount?
That means you're...
I don't subscribe to Paramount. I've got a religious objection to buying it, to paying for a service, so I only want to watch one thing on it. Yes, it's Star Trek.
It's very good. Well, you can watch the Paris website.
I'm waiting for them to release it for online streaming purposes for purchase, but yeah, it's a bit problematic because it isn't at the quality level I expected from the first few seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's a lot of people doing that. Alternatively, you can migrate to other country in Nordics, and they have released that already.
Yeah.
Yes. Luckily, I live in Denmark, so I know that feeling. It's really good.
Yeah, I watch Danish TV every day.
Of course. I don't.
At least
Panel, is there anything we forgot for the audience?
Glass of wine.
I've sorted that out. But it was a little bit too early. We're not allowed to drink down here.
I would say that this transition is an awful lot of work for everyone. So from that perspective, it's very good. In the end, there will be a better experience for everybody. There might be some wrinkles in the way, but we'll get there. And actually, we'll have a great experience, and we'll look back on it just like I've looked back on it today with that wonky television that I had to tune really with a big knob on the front of it. Yeah, it all works better in the end. Now we know who all the people are with dirty minds.
I'm glad there's no thought bubbles in it.